The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 years, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Vlad Costa from Bitcoin Takeover Podcast,
What's up, party people?
Jimmy Song, Bitcoin expert,
Blessed Christmas, everybody.
Robert Allen, co-founder of Satlantis,
Merry Christmas. Good to be back.
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue 1. Bitcoin price prediction. Record SEC filings signal flood of Wall Street money. Supercycle starting in 2026. Bitcoin SEC filings hit 8,000 in 2025, driven by ETF growth and new U.S. crypto laws. Is a 2026 rally next? The price is hovering near 88,898, according to this article. Vlad Costa, what do you think about the price of Bitcoin? Is it going to go up like crazy in 2026? Everyone seems to say yes.
This sort of reminds me of 2017, when everyone was saying that we're going to hit 50,000, 100,000 in 2018, and we had one of the ugliest bear markets. I do believe that the 4-year cycle is a strong psychological element, like part of the culture of this space. And I think our bullish narrative was stronger during paper Bitcoin summer or earlier in the year when the ETFs were still fresh and they had like record inflows. Now we're just coping, I think. I don't think the bullish narrative works very well. When Michael Saylor bought a bunch of Bitcoin like a month ago, the price did not react to that. It seems like the good news don't move the price up, but the bad news moves it down. So to me, that's a strong indicator that this is copium. I don't know, I'll let you guys opine also.
Well, today is the day of the quadruple witching, the options expiry where they all go off on one day. It doesn't happen all at once. The reaction to that, depending on if people win or lose their long and short bets and how that shakes out over the future, they say that it will release Bitcoin from this range, meaning it could go crazy up or crazy down. Jimmy Song, the question is though, 2026, many people have said 200,000 by the year end, said Arthur Hayes. What do you think?
I saw what Jim Cramer was saying. He's 100% bearish on Bitcoin, which means really good news. I am going to go with the Contra Cramer indicator as my thing. No, I mean, who knows, right? Like we don't know any of this stuff, and you know we're just sort of hoping, and this is what most price predictions are. It's people wanting to hope in something, and they watch the price shows because they're more conducive to having hope in something. And honestly, it's a little sad to me that so many people are going down that road. But you know, if you understand Bitcoin for what it is, it's a great long-term store of value. It's never lost money if you've held it for 5 years or longer. That's what we should be focused on and not worry so much about the short-term fluctuations.
That would be nice, and it would be nice if people could write some articles about anything other than the price. When I do my Google searches, it's all price, 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 variations of that. So we always try to pay attention to that here and then get moving on. Robert Allen, I want some concrete predictions. I want you to tell me about the future of Bitcoin in 2026.
Well, Jimmy stole my reverse Kramer thunder, I have to say. That's a pretty good that's pretty good news for us. Yeah, I think it's going to go higher just based on that. No, I think, you know, kind of echoing Jimmy again. I mean, Bitcoin is better money than any alternative. Sometimes the market is behind in figuring that out. But given enough time and patience, Bitcoin is going to continue to outperform every other asset in history. And I don't see any fundamental reason why that dynamic or that direction or that momentum should be, you know, questioned. I think, you know, in a lot of ways, now that we're kind of peak pain and a lot of people are freaking out and worried, this is typically when, it actually does boomerang and go the other way. So, but yeah, I mean, Bitcoin's always going to surprise us. And in some ways that's good. We want to shake out the loose hands and make sure we have conviction, strong conviction. So just hang in there, be patient. It's all going to be all right.
It will be interesting to see. And before we go to the Magic 8 Ball, we do have the exit question. BlackRock shares 2026 shocking crypto outlook. Big money is starting to treat crypto less like a trade and more like a system, and it's all about the rise of stablecoins. Thanks to the success of recent legislation, the Genius Act, passed by the Trump administration, big finance can suddenly focus on stablecoins, and focus they are. The question I want to ask the panel, Vlad Casa, what's more important right now, Bitcoin or stablecoins? Do you start to see another one of these narrative shifts similar to ICOs, blockchains, and now stablecoins?
Well, not within my bubble, but I do understand that a large part of Latin America and the Middle East and pretty much a lot of the places that actually need Bitcoin are turning to stablecoins and using them for daily transactions. And they're sort of eating our lunch. And it's super ironic that Bitfinex Tether is funding a bunch of Bitcoin companies, but at the same time, they're not supporting grassroots adoption too much, except if it's for Tether. I don't know. So normally, like 2, 3 years ago, before I met my girlfriend, I would be more against stable coins. But now that I know that she's from Iran and that's the only way her parents send her money, I'm not so much against it. I understand it's a genuine market and there's demand for this. Is it censorship resistant like Bitcoin? No, it's not. Can it be confiscated? Yes. Is it really stable? No. We have seen lots of these algorithmic stable coins and projects that went down. Terra Luna was like 3, 4 years ago. I lost count. I'm not saying that it's going to happen to Tether, even if everything is possible. And what else? I don't think too much about this. Like, I don't care about Larry Fink. I don't care about USDT too much. I don't use it. But it seems to be a big deal nowadays. Just not the big deal that made me get into Bitcoin in the first place. I look at other stuff.
It does seem like Tether is well backstopped, especially as we talked about a few weeks ago, their potential purchase of the Juventus football team. And we've also seen, Vlad, as you said, stablecoins being used by people, things we used to describe for uses for Bitcoin, sending someone money and it having been the same value, and you could just cash it out into cash. We used to say that, but now they could just hold it in a stable coin. Jimmy Song, what do you think? Are stable coins going to take away Bitcoin's limelight, or it will be all Bitcoin in 2026?
Well, stable coins have always had like a different niche than Bitcoin, and it's stuff like Vlad mentioned, transferring money in across places where you have sanctions and so on. I remember visiting Georgia, the country, not the state, and there were all these places that you can send Tether back and forth to Russia and so on because obviously Russia was under sanction and so on. So that's a very common use case, and for me, stable coins are kind of like Western Union 2.0, something like that, and a lot of people like it for that reason. And that's not to say that um, it's decentralized or anything. It's highly centralized. We know that we know who the owners of Tether are, and how many regulations that they're under and so on. But yeah, it's a useful thing for people in a lot of these places because people want dollars, and you have Indonesian workers that go to work in UAE and send money back home using Tether and stuff like that. Think that's a perfectly fine use case. It just sort of speaks to the lack of infrastructure with the US dollar that's available. And it happens so that because bond rates are so high, because interest rates are so high, that a company like Tether can make enormous amounts of money just holding US treasuries, like short-term US treasury bonds that are 3 to 6 months in nature. And they make so much money off of that because they have over $100 billion in of assets under management, and they get like 4%, 5% on that, and that's $4 or $5 billion every year. That's how you get 50 people doing that. The big story for me with regard to stablecoins is this is what a free market banking solution would look like, were it not so regulated by government. And Tether has like 50 employees. They have a bigger market cap, I think, than Goldman Sachs and other banks. Like Citigroup employs 200,000 people, right? And they have a much lower market cap, even though they might actually handle more money. Like it just tells you how much grift is in that system, how much rent seeking is in that system, how much of it is overhead and regulatory compliance and so on. It's ridiculous, but that's I'm glad that stable coins exist because they're actually kind of better than banks. But in
Indeed.
regard to Bitcoin, yeah, I mean, like I think Bitcoin's gonna do well as it always does because it's a great store of value, and that's what a lot of people use it for and continue to use it for.
I agree, Jenny. Tether is some kind of a business miracle, especially when they bought heavily into Bitcoin at the bottom, perhaps even using their reserves against the rules. But at the same time, they originally it seemed like they were used mainly for U.S. people to avoid taxes. Whenever you sell out into dollars, I think you have to pay a tax. If you sell out into Tether, it's like holding another cryptocurrency. That seemed like a small use for stablecoins, but as you're saying, Jimmy, it's apparently grown to this worldwide industry of people using Tether and using stables in a lot of the things that Andreas and other Bitcoiners used to describe as things that Bitcoin would do. Small payments, global payments, all of them for free, but with none of the potential pseudo anonymity or transparency or any of the things that we used to talk about. So it's interesting to see the industry kind of diverge that way. And certainly the Tether people were probably Bitcoiners in the beginning, made a big Bitcoin pick on their own. And then now we see them fronting stables. Let's go to Robert Allen. What do you think about stable coins versus Bitcoin in 2026?
Well, I'm married a Nigerian. I live in Lagos right now. And so I've been able to understand this a bit more than I did, previous, just because I'm around folks who use USDT quite regularly. And I've, had a lot of conversations and just been able to see how the world operates in a country like Nigeria. And, I think the average income here is something like $70 a month. And so the reality is, for most people in that position, they don't have any savings. They're living hand to mouth. And so, they're looking at remittances, moving money across borders, and they're going to get that money and then immediately use it, generally speaking. So, Bitcoin is not really scratching that itch. We're getting closer to having the infrastructure for that to make sense with Bitcoin, but then you still have the sort of just misunderstanding or lack of understanding of what Bitcoin is, and the volatility is quite scary. If you've got $50 and that's your entire savings, and the price of Bitcoin is fluctuating like it does, you may not want that sort of volatility in your little savings account, so to speak. So I think it makes sense, right? And the dollar has name recognition. It's for a lot of countries, it is the thing that they want. They're trying to get rid of naira and hold dollars. The naira lost, went from about 500 to 1 to it's around 1500 to 1 today, and that happened in about 3 to 4 years. The last 3 to 4 years that happened. So yeah, I think Bitcoiners, we are also a bit detached, a lot of us, in terms of wealth, relatively speaking. Like, we have a lot of wealth compared to most people on Earth. And so maybe sometimes we're just operating from a perspective that's not the average human. And so Bitcoin doesn't quite scratch that itch today. But, I think, can we get, stable coins trading on Lightning and other protocols, and that's, kind of been, it's going to happen next year for the last 5 years. But I do think at some point we'll start to see momentum in that direction. And so then once you have a wallet that's Bitcoin and Tether, and they're kind of easier to interoperate with, then I think some folks will naturally start to look at Bitcoin, and it'll be sort of the gate, USDT will be the gateway drug for some people to get into Bitcoin, if you will.
It does seem like there's great international demand for digital dollars. It's unfortunate that profits are going to Tether and other countries or other companies rather than the United States. And like you say, Robert, inflation in the United States, we just started complaining about it recently. It's nothing compared to inflation in other countries. It happens over a weekend. You get paid on a Friday. You have less money on a Monday. I have heard of people stocking up on, whiskey or toilet paper or other things that people that don't go bad, cans of tuna or whatever, if they could get digital dollars instead, especially of their local currency, whatever it may be, it's an obvious no-brainer. They would much rather have the US dollars. So it's interesting to see. We're also joined by Stephen Mackey. How's it going, Mackey? What do you think about stable coins versus Bitcoin in 2026?
He may have dropped.
Oh, I was just going to introduce him. Damn. Oh, well, he was going to be a voice anyway because he doesn't do videos. So he tricked me by leaving. But oh, well, we'll move on to predictions. We have the magical Bitcoin predictor ball. We're going to predict the future. But first, Jimmy Song, do you think the price is going up or down this time next week?
Oh, Kramer, up, of course.
Robert Allen, up or down?
Yeah, I agree. Kramer's blessed us all.
Vlad Costa, is it a sweep? Is everyone positive, higher or lower?
I mean, there has to be a pessimist in this conversation just for the fun of the game. I wish it would go up, but let's say down just to have a different perspective.
All right, and I'll stay with always bullish, although I don't know anything. The ball knows all. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? And it is... Cannot predict now. Cannot predict now. If the ball's not right, sometimes it cannot predict. Moving on to issue 2. Russia, United States discuss Bitcoin mining at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, sidelining Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the United States is, quote, interested in crypto mining at the new Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in the disputed territory of Ukraine. Jimmy Song, what do you think about the opportunity, I suppose, of the United States to mine Bitcoin in Ukraine? The United States, for the record, has disavowed this story, although we never know what's going on. There's one source for this story. It seems to be Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, we have no idea what's going on in Ukraine, regardless of the press, because like both sides are going to say whatever is convenient politically for themselves. So I mean, I don't trust any war propaganda as far as I can spit. So I don't count this story at all. Are there places that maybe you can mine? Probably, but I don't think, given the current situation in Ukraine, that anything like that is viable. And the instability that I would expect from that region for the next decade or so is not conducive to that either. So I mean, Bitcoin mining does have the advantage that you can sort of pull out quickly if you want to and get most of it, but the power infrastructure that you need to support mining is not trivial. And depending on what type of mining is being done there, it can actually take quite a long time. We know, for example, that the volcano energy stuff in El Salvador, that's like a 4 or 5 year project just to get the thing going, right? And it's a long capital outlay, and that's not abnormal for this sort of thing. So yeah, I really don't think there's anything to this story. The real mining is happening in the good places and so on.
It does seem like an almost farcical idea, similar to Werner Herzog's film Fitzcarraldo, where they take a ship and push it over a mountain to another river, which actually happened in the film, but wouldn't happen in reality. To imagine Bitmain or any company shipping all of their miners into a war zone, then to mine them at a nuclear power plant that's kind of disputed territory amongst two powers, seems incredibly risky, but also seems like a good movie. I'd watch it. Robert Allen, what do you think? Will Putin succeed? Will he mine Bitcoin in Ukraine?
Yeah, I would agree with Jimmy. This seems like a crazy idea. I mean, don't they have other power plants in Russia they could use? Of all the places to try to build a new business in the middle of a war zone seems like a rough spot to pick. But I do think more broadly speaking that, nuclear is a great technology, and I know it's expensive to get these plants going, but it's a shame that like Germany shut all theirs down and now they're freezing. The United States has kind of put a hold on it, I think, for at least the last maybe 10, 15 years, as far as I understand. Anyway, let's mine more Bitcoin with nuclear. I think that's a win-win for everybody, just not in a war zone.
That's right. Nuclear power has been making a comeback recently, although it might need newly designed reactors that are safer. Vlad Costa, what do you think about the plans to mine Bitcoin in the middle of a war zone, as Robert said?
I mean, why not? But at the same time, if you look at the source of the article, it cites the media, commerce, and news agency, but it's also based on a tweet by the Kiev Post. So it's very unclear to me where this comes from. This whole story, to me, if you put it in the right context, it sounds like the art of the deal. Like Donald Trump likes playing this sort of game where he says, I just negotiated a nuclear deal to mine Bitcoin in Ukraine on occupied land by the Russians. And then this is supposed to just push the negotiations further to make it look like the Ukrainians are being pushed out of the deal and then they have to come back and ask for another opportunity or something, or try to make concessions to make it work. It sounds like geopolitics to me. Is it such a big deal that they would be mining Bitcoin in this place? I don't think it's gonna have like a significant impact on the hash rate. But it does sound like a productive way of using the excess electricity that's being produced. And I bet that a lot of it is being wasted. It also says that this Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was captured by Russian troops in March 2022. And it's also not operational right now. So the conversation is, it says right here, its 6 reactors are in safety shutdown and depend solely on emergency diesel generators for essential cooling with frequent cuts. So we're talking about something that hasn't been functional for 3 years, almost 4, hypothetically being used to mine Bitcoin. It sounds cool in theory, but I don't see it happening.
I think it's futuristic, futuristic. But like Vlad said, very much Trump playing the art of the deal. Now there's a non existent Bitcoin mining deal that Ukraine has to come and say, hey, wait a minute, we want our cut of that mining deal that doesn't even exist. And maybe he just wants people to talk about Bitcoin more because he's got a couple of companies like American Bitcoin and so forth that would benefit. Who knows what kind of long game they're playing? But it is an interesting idea for countries to collaborate together on power sharing agreements and nuclear power, and maybe even using a smart contract to send the mined Bitcoin back to the countries directly. This way, even countries that didn't trust each other could mine Bitcoin together. Leading to our exit question, Jimmy Song, in the future, where should Bitcoin countries mine together? Where should they mine Bitcoin as a team?
I mean, it's wherever you can put thorium reactors, I think. And the regulatory apparatus around nuclear power is it's more or less imposed by the United States due to the liberal hegemony that decided nuclear power was bad back in the 60s and 70s. So It's unfortunate, but that's a situation where whatever region can sort of get out from under the international atomic nuclear non-proliferation sort of bureaucracy. That's I think who will win the mining stuff, because energy is obviously very critical, and miners are sort of hitting a wall as far as like efficiency and so on.
It does seem like in the future, a country like Switzerland, where they have a project like CERN that works on the Large Hadron Collider, and they're even making a larger Hadron Collider, would have to all work together and, like Jimmy's saying, build these large reactors for the shared purpose of mining Bitcoin in a safe place. And maybe it ends up like Wakanda in the Black Panther movie, and they have all the technology because of this early investment in Bitcoin mining. Robert Allen, where in the future should companies mine Bitcoin or countries mine Bitcoin together?
That's an interesting question. I mean, if you're talking about multiple countries working together, I guess they would have to be relatively small countries. So, maybe we do see some of these larger nation states, bifurcate, break into pieces. So maybe 10, 20, 30 years, the United States will be, 3 or 4, Texas and some of the southern, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess it really, yeah, it would just have to be, smaller nation states working together. So I guess it depends on where you are on Earth. Some places that makes sense, some places it wouldn't. The US doesn't have many, neighbors. We've got 2, currently at least, but so I don't know. Maybe Africa, I guess in that sense, Africa's got quite a few countries and a lot of power needs and a lot of power problems. So if they could get their act together, to build some nuclear here, that would be great. Although I wouldn't hold my breath right now. They've got a lot of
If you're
political
going to build
problems.
for one country in Africa, why not have the three of them share it? Share
Yeah,
the
yeah.
power output, share the financial risk. Jimmy, more on this? I saw you unmute. Go.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen. If you know the history of the region, it is there's so many small groups that are vying for supremacy, religious conflicts,
But now
ancient
is your
tribal
chance
conflicts
to
and
come
stuff.
together through the magic of smart contracts.
That's not
You
how
can't trust each
those
other,
things work.
but you could trust a smart contract.
No, that's not how that region has operated for a very, very long time. So yeah, that's not gonna happen, man. It's so far out of the realm of possibility.
I also think Robert might have a point when he mentioned Texas and he talked about the states. Maybe multiple states could work together to build a Bitcoin mine or to build one on shared territory or some kind of geographic near a waterfall, some kind of thing that would generate the power. Something in the future. Vlad Costa, your last but best. Where should they mine Bitcoin in the future?
At home with home miners. That's my final answer. I think that's the end game. We already see how a bunch of these Bitcoin mining facilities are pivoting into AI because they make more money, even though they invested in a bunch of S19 XPs or whatever the latest model is. They realize that they can make more money working with AI companies. And I see a lot of competition nowadays between AI and proof of work mining. I do believe that it's ultimately the Bitcoin holders who have the largest stake in this, in securing this network, and they should be the ones securing it. And I do believe that at some point we're gonna run into a situation where mining is no longer profitable. So what's it gonna happen? Well, you're gonna have people who own Bitcoin wanting to secure Bitcoin, and I think at some point we're gonna go back to home mining. And if we reach like a reasonable amount of adoption up until that point, I think the network will be fine. And also it's harder to take down a network or disrupt the hash rate and play games with the difficulty adjustment if you have a bunch of believers actually securing the network.
There's an interesting narrative coming out recently, Vlad, about this home miner as a lottery ticket theory. That you plug in your home miner. It used to be USB miners back in the day. Now they call them bit axes. But somebody won a whole block recently, and it's united the whole idea that you could be the lottery winner. But I think they should focus more on heat. The thing about a home miner is that it always makes heat, and it also always makes noise, the worst thing in the world. So I don't know about home mining. We'll have to see how that goes. The answer is they should mine on the moon. I hope they don't take the nuclear stuff through the atmosphere. Maybe they could gather it somehow from the solar system. I don't know. But mine on the moon. And we could all do it together, and we could share the profits through a great smart contract, which we could all trust, whatever country we may be from. And we could all share in profits from the moon.
Yeah, but
Moving
that's
on.
not gonna work because you have, like, if you travel with the speed of light with your radio signal from the moon to Earth, you're still gonna have a significant delay that's gonna make moon miners inefficient. At least they're not gonna find the blocks first, and that's gonna be an issue.
Maybe they could mine some moon currency and they could trade it for Bitcoin. I know Peter Todd talked about interstellar mining, but he had the same kind of problem. I think he suggested a Mars coin. You could mine that, something we could mine closer to the sun as we start to build a Dyson sphere. We have a lot of work to do, humanity. We have a lot of work. We're going to need a lot of robots. Any more on this topic? All right, let's move.
Just so you know, like
On
the
the
distance to the
moon.
moon is actually very, very short. It's 1.28 seconds. Yeah, that does like make it a little bit more, but that's not the reason why it wouldn't work. The main reason is because there's not that much power there. Like, what are you gonna get? Like sun? If you're gonna do that, you might as well just orbit the Earth. So there's what's there that's useful that you wouldn't get either on Earth or in the atmosphere around the Earth. So hey, I don't see the moon.
I think you could get regulatory clarity, but not much else. Not much else on the moon. And I was thinking if it's too far, we could always run a cable, like a space elevator. We could run a really long network cable up there, and then we could network in the moon. But I think it's a good idea. I'm sure somebody's going to work on it. Maybe not us. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got 4,687 videos. You could watch them for 3 months, 23 days, and 6 hours straight without any breaks. It's been 12 years and 25 days since our first video. So happy birthday, World Crypto Network. Although I think we really started in February, so I'm not sure where that's counting from. Anyway, check it out at worldcryptonetwork.com. Issue 3, MoMA adds CryptoPunks and Chromie Squiggles to its collection, becoming the latest major museum to acquire on-chain art. NFTs are back in the news, but prices are not back. NFTs are now being collected by major art museums such as the Museum of Modern Art. They've collected some CryptoPunks, some Chromie Squiggles, not pictured. Here's a CryptoPunk. Robert Allen, what do you think about NFTs and major museums such as MoMA signing in?
It's definitely gonna keep tanking from here because modern art sucks. So yeah, that's like a nail in the coffin, in my opinion.
Some modern art is really hard to take. Other modern art is really good. It's hard to say, but it is very hit and miss. Maybe they hit with the punks. I don't know. I saw a CryptoPunk previously in the Pompidou Museum, and they had a couple of other NFTs displayed. I've seen NFTs displayed at the what's it called? The Museum MoCA in Amsterdam and other places. But now at MoMA here in the United States. Vlad Costa, what do you think about NFTs in the museum?
I mean, you have to look at it from the perspective of the museum. They do have to attract younger people and get kids to come to their places. Maybe it sounds outrageous, but so did a lot of the art that they displayed in the past, like a banana that they tape on the wall or whatever splash of ink that you put on an empty canvas. So it's not the worst kind of art that they can possibly have. It's definitely something that's different in the sense that basically art is created for the purpose of expressing emotion. CryptoPunks, as far as I know, they were AI generated, and also they were made to exist on markets since day one. So they're sort of a very commercial kind of art. They're not made to give you any sort of feeling when you look at them. Their purpose is actually to get traded. and to get traded according to certain traits that they have, like the color of their hair, color of their eyes, and whatever else they have, accessories. So it's interesting. I don't see the NFT market making a comeback because of this, but it is part of culture. If you think about it, 4 years ago there was a South Park episode where they made fun of NFTs. Like it or not, it's part of culture, and at one point it was very big. I think right now they could grab these CryptoPunks for very low prices and they can display them, whatever. They just need a screen, ironically, because I don't think they exist on actual canvas or in physical format.
That's true, Vlad. I don't think they've ever been a painting or a drawing. They were AI generated from a
I've
variety
seen
of
them on
traits.
t-shirts.
T-shirt might be their natural home. But you are right. I do think the younger generation, I can picture them taking an Instagram with their favorite crypto punk, or maybe they dress up like the punk and it draws the kids into the museums. Who knows? Maybe it's worth it. For what it's worth, I think, I'm not sure on this, that the rights to the crypto punk are included, so the museum could use it in marketing materials, make digital versions, make little videos, animations, perhaps also with the squiggies or squiggles or whatever they are. So it could be good graphics for the museum, books, branding. I don't know. Jimmy Song, what do you think about MoMA acquiring CryptoPunks and Squiggies,
Well,
Squiggles?
modern art and museums have been a complete joke for the last 50, 60 years anyway. So this is par for the course. And, marriage made in heaven, I think, or in hell, however you want to look at it. The fact of the matter is, like, modern art has been a money laundering tool for a lot of fiat money that has nowhere else to go. And it's unfortunate, but that's a lot of it is driven by fiat money. It's driven by, fiat art collecting and museum curators and art history majors that are in rent-seeking positions of bureaucracy and so on. So, in a sense, this makes sense because NFTs and all of that are, artificial scarcity that's centralized, that's made for this sort of thing. And it's, yeah, when you're like a grifter, you can recognize other grifters pretty well. And I think museum curators in this case have recognized that, yeah, they're doing the same hustle essentially as the museum curators have been doing for a long time. So, um, as far as like getting younger people in and stuff like that, it's like, I mean, maybe, but like what I want to wait for is when that, that punk thing NFT gets stolen by somebody, and then suddenly all the rights to the museum stuff that they once had is no longer valid, and then they get sued by whoever stole it, I guess. I don't know. It should be hilarious when that happens, because inevitably it will, because these places don't take security all that seriously, and maybe they know something about physical security, but I really, really doubt that they're very good at cybersecurity. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, is having their NFT stolen by some hacker in North Korea, and then North Korean government suing them for using marketing materials or something because they're the rightful owner as the signer of the NFT private key.
I think that would definitely happen, Jimmy, and I can see the government stealing the figure as well. Maybe they could use it in the North Korean government marketing, the same way the museum was. And as we all know, modern art was invented by the CIA as part of the competition with the Soviets. The Soviets had all this good art. They wanted to say, oh, yeah, look at this great American art. And the only way they felt they could top them was by backing artists such as Jackson Pollock and organizing the first art shows. Many of the first large purchases of modern art were made by the CIA. So maybe it's happening again. Moving on to the exit question, NFTs in 2026. Do they go up or down? In the past, altcoins have latched onto Bitcoin, returning every cycle. Will the NFT market return in 2026? Robert Allen.
No, not going to happen.
Vlad Costa.
I don't know. I hope if anything makes a comeback, it's gonna be rare Pepes because those at least are funny. But NFT market, no, not so much. Like it was ridiculous 4 years ago how basically anything they could find was supposed to have some sort of value, and they would just look at silly JPEGs. And I think the story behind it was more powerful, which is usually the case with art, especially modern art, post photography. So yeah, I don't see it going up.
Jimmy Song, NFTs up or down in 2026?
Down, and I would like to contend with your assertion that altcoins go up with Bitcoin. Actually, most of them stay dead. It's just like a few of the most popular ones that prop up. So, maybe one collection, maybe like I don't know, the Bored Ape or something like that will go up, but pretty much everything else, the vast majority of this infinitely reproducible centralized crap will stay at or near zero. Which, by the way, is also true of modern art. Did you know that like 80% of what gets sold in at Sotheby's auction actually never gets sold again? It's a risk that you're never going to actually make money on some of the supposedly best art in the world that you get at auction. So that tells you again that these people see the same grift and kind of have respect for the hustle, I guess, as you would by the NFT market.
I think you're definitely right, Jimmy. A lot of art, and especially modern art, goes to zero. However, I do think we might be surprised, and even though we don't like it, a top five, a top 10 of NFTs might emerge and come back at least a little bit every time, similar to altcoins. Moving on to issue 4. Caroline freed. FTX fraudster is out in weeks, according to this tweet by Mario Nafal, saying skated and can't run stuff for 10 years. Caroline Ellison, the ex Alameda CEO who helped blow up FTX, is set to walk on January 21st after barely a year in custody. She flipped on SBF, dodged hard time, moved to a halfway house, and now she's getting free. Snitches go free, whereas SBF is stuck until prison until 2044. Vlad Costa, what do you think about the possible and seemingly imminent release of Caroline Ellison?
I don't think about it, to be honest. But I'll never forget when she revealed like the floor price to tank the FTT token. Like she said, "Oh, we're gonna buy all of your FTT tokens below." I don't know how much it was, like $16 or something. And that's when it all collapsed and the traders wrecked them. And they were not backed by anything. They had all of these positions that you could open, perpetuals and whatever, that unlike BitMEX, they had no reserves to actually pay out those who were opening the trades. It was just a nice story. Like all of FTX, I would not be surprised if there's gonna be a movie about it in 20 years or something, coming from Hollywood, which reveals that it was all just this CIA operation or whatever to try to fight against Binance, which turns out to be the Chinese whatever. And they were trying to fight the monopoly of Binance with FTX. And when you look at it, FTX came out in 2018 or 2019, and they rose to prominence in like 3 years. And at some point, they were one of the most popular exchanges. They were everywhere. If you watched sports, you would see the FTX logo on some teams' shirts. If you were watching concerts, there was an FTX arena somewhere in the world. It was hard to escape FTX. They had all the celebrities like Tom Brady and a bunch of others doing ads for them. And then the whole scheme collapsed. And it seems like the elites, or at least the judicial system, don't want them to be doing hard time, except for the CEO, which basically took the fall. And Caroline turned on him. She was also his girlfriend at one point and basically decided she's not gonna rot in jail for this guy. I don't know. I do believe that this lady, Caroline, caused a lot of people a lot of financial pain and was very dishonest in what she was promoting about FTX. But maybe the fact that she gave information to the feds, which once again we're never going to know until it gets declassified, I guess gave her a much lighter sentence, and she's gonna be able to do whatever to be free. And as far as I understand, she also has like a restriction from ever investing in companies related to cryptocurrency for like 20 years, which is fair. But her sentence was light, and I do see her. It would be very funny if she got like a university professor position, like a guest lecturer or whatever, to teach students about finance. That would make the whole story go full circle. Because if I understand correctly, her parents were also, or SBF's parents were academics or whatever, but either way, very educated family.
Well, I like your movie idea, Vlad, with Binance and the CIA fighting each other with FTX. My movie, your movie's a thriller. My movie's more of a buddy comedy. I see them as a bunch of idiots. FTX, the guy has like a Hawaiian shirt and his hair is a big mess, and they're all messing around down there in the tropics, just losing people's money, being complete morons. And it focuses heavily on the polycool. It's kind of a Porky's meets Dirty Money. But either way, I agree with you. She got out of jail way too fast. She's definitely a rat. She definitely got rewarded. Jimmy Song, what do you think about Caroline Ellison? She's gonna go free. She definitely had a hand in people losing their life savings, family fortunes, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, she's a snitch, right? Like, if you snitch and witness for the government, this is the reward you get, is you get less jail time. It's what you would call in a prisoner's dilemma, like the quadrant where you screw the other person, but you get the lighter sentence, and that's what she got. So, not surprised that she's released early. That's the deal. That's what you sign up for when you agree to snitch for the government. That said, like, what's her future? I have no idea. I mean, I really don't think she has sort of like the weird sort of autistic sort of magnetism of SBF. He's in my theory, he was imitating like from like a Girardian perspective, like Vitalik Buterin, right? Like he was trying to like sort of imitate that energy, and he was largely successful in doing that for FTX. And she was honestly kind of a part of it. He's not gonna go after like a supermodel. He's gonna go after sort of like the nerdy girl that's got that sort of similar autistic energy. So she ended up flipping, so she's kind of home free at this point, other than, restrictions she wasn't ever going to do anything with anyway. Who knows what happens for the rest of her life, but I suspect she'll just sort of go away with a whimper. No one's gonna hear from her again. She doesn't seem to have that sort of desire to make it big, right? Like there are people where they come out of prison, you're like, okay, yeah, they're gonna go try to do something else. I remember Jeff Skilling from Enron. When he came out of prison, almost like a week later, he was like launching an altcoin or something, and that's kind of what you expect from certain types of people that have, I don't know, that will to power, I guess. But she doesn't strike me as someone that does that. So I think she'll go away quietly, maybe get an administrative job somewhere. It's hard to get a job as an ex-con, obviously, but I'm sure the government has something lined up for her. Maybe it's even like talking to other people that have gone to prison or something. I don't know. She'll be doing something. But I don't think she's going to make any impact whatsoever in this industry for the rest of her life.
Pop quiz, Jimmy Song. Do you think she'll be speaking at conferences? What if she gives a speech about like how not to commit financial fraud, and she's like the McGruff, the crime dog of the financial industry, and the FBI recruits her to make speeches? Is it going to be like RazzleCon? Will we see her in the audience trying to make her own startup or something?
Well, Razzlecon has a lot more sort of magnetism or desire or will than Caroline does. So, like, she's actually actively looking for that, and she has like a personality at least. Um, with Caroline, like the impression I get is that she's always been more comfortable in the background, and it wasn't like she took on sort of some of SBF's personality when they were in a relationship, but like once you flip, once you snitch, you're not really that anymore. So I don't think she's going to get any conference invites. Who would actually invite her, right? Like, oh, actually, no. Like, what are you going to talk about that's interesting? I guess maybe a panel on something or other, maybe. But like, then what are you going to do? Pay her for it? Like that would be like, who's going to go to a conference with her in it? I don't know. She's not exactly a draw. So yeah, I don't really think that that would be the case. I mean, the hope that she has, and this is if she were smart enough to do this, is like if she stowed away some Bitcoin somewhere and she can kind of go live off of that very quietly for the rest of her life, that would be it. But there are rules around this stuff. If you're under if you're under parole, you have to get approvals for almost any travel outside your state. Even going to stuff like that would be difficult to get your parole officer to agree to. Assuming it's not in her state and so on. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't see her as someone that's going to be prominent. I really think she's gonna go and be sort of a quiet person for the rest of her life.
I think she could speak at accounting conventions and all kinds of things for the FBI. Be like, tee hee, I was over my head and I lost billions of dollars. Don't be like me. Do the due diligence or have multiple books or whatever you're supposed to find. Another
Yeah, I
option
mean,
for the
but like,
conference.
would you want to if you were her? You have like thousands of people that got screwed by
I think she
FTX
needs the money,
that
right?
like
Doesn't she have to pay back some of that? Or I guess that's only
no, no, I
saying.
know. I mean, I don't think so. But I like the thing is like she's like I would think she'd fear for her safety even on that stuff. There's a lot of people that got screwed, and not just like normal retail investors. There's like some significant people that were involved in that whole fraudulent enterprise. And yeah, I don't know. I really don't think it's in her interest to do any of that either.
That's what I thought. In a lighter way, maybe they could have her in a dunk tape, or we could throw tomatoes at her, something like that. But you're right, Jimmy. It's not safe for her. Robert Allen, they say Caroline is going free. She might have taken your life savings with her. What do you think about this?
Well, you got to watch out for goblins. They have a history of meddling in money, and she's definitely she's definitely a goblin. She also makes me believe in phrenology, the ancient practice of kind of figuring out if someone's going to be a criminal based on the shape of their head. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, just be careful who you trust your money with. And obviously, this is why we Bitcoin, because you can be your own bank and not trust goblins and crazy people. So, feel sad for people that they got duped. Hopefully they learned a lesson and learn how to Bitcoin the right way. Yeah, I mean the whole thing is just hilarious. I mean, if people hadn't been, wrecked from it, it's just crazy, crazy story. Glad that FTX is gone. One less mess.
The only thing that I regret is that SBF wasn't able to rat on himself. If only he had been able to go out there and turn himself in, he could have gotten the great deal that all of his friends got and gotten out of jail quickly, just like Caroline. Just didn't work out that way. Moving on to the next issue, we've got some bonus issues. Former CEO of Mt. Gox, Mark Karpelès, reveals details of 2014 collapse and Japanese detention. People were very critical of Mark Karpelès in the time. Now, with retrospect, it seems like he might have been sold a broken business that may have already been missing money and operating at a negative reserve, or he might have gotten hacked or accidentally hacked by people pushing the refresh button and getting multiple withdrawals. It seems all kinds of other problems at Mark Karpelès. Is it time to forgive Mark Jimmy Song, what do you think about the latest article and Mark Karpelès back in the news again?
Yeah, the article was interesting because he claimed that there were people accusing him of being Dread Pirate Roberts, which I did not really uh, think was a thing, that people would think him of all people, being as prominent as he was at the time. But yeah, I mean, this is a guy that did his time and so on. I think he's trying to do better. I honestly think he's kind of like a lottery winner in that sense. Like he got into something that was a little bit above his station, or maybe a lot above his station, and he wasn't ready for it from a financial perspective, a security perspective, a technical perspective, and this kind of what happens when you bite off more than you can chew, and he kind of became that. And yeah, I do think the hack happened before, and Jed McCaleb of Ripple fame is to blame for a lot of the pain that a lot of the Mt. Gox people went through, and he sits free without having served a day in jail, which I think is completely unjust. He should be like Do Kwon or Mashinsky or SBF or whatever, and serve his time in prison. Of course, a lot of altcoiners should spend their time in prison, given how much they've screwed over so many people all over the world, some very poor people in a lot of different countries. But yeah, I mean, I think he kind of gets a bad rap because he was kind of overwhelmed and not really ready to do the thing that he ended up having to do. And his security sucked. His and he just wasn't the right fit at the right time. But he happened to be in the right place at the right time. And a lot of people sort of like go through these weird regret stories, right? Oh, had I bought Bitcoin when I first heard about it in 2011, I'd be like a billionaire right now. This I think is like a cautionary tale because a lot of people did end up like Magical Talks, right? And Mark Karpelès, where you end up making terrible choices because you didn't have necessarily the character or skills to be able to handle them properly. And you actually end up in a much worse place as a result of having been in Bitcoin. I mean, I'm pretty sure he would rather have not been in Bitcoin and also not spent time in prison, right? Like that probably would have been better. So you got to be careful what you wish for, and you got to, and it's not all roses just because you got into Bitcoin early.
I do think there was part of the Ulbricht defense where they were trying to say that Karpelès or maybe someone who worked at Mt. Gox was the Dread Pirate Roberts. There's also an idea that multiple people logged into the DPR account, so the Dread Pirate Roberts could have been many people operating under an alias, but only Ross went to jail. Robert Allen, what do you think about Mark Karpelès, the Mt. Gox collapse a long time ago now? People lost Bitcoins with an S back then. But what do you think about the idea that we should, give him a break and maybe he's not so bad?
Yeah, I guess I tend to agree with Jimmy that he's probably a guy who was in over his head, rather than being, like setting out to rob people and doing it intentionally. I'm happy for him. He looks like he's much healthier. He lost weight and got a tan. So at least in that sense, it looks like he's winning. Yeah. Like, wow, handsome guy. I don't know what happened to him.
That was shortly after he was released from prison, which I think was like 6 years ago. So
Oh,
I don't know if
okay.
he still looks like that,
Oh,
but
I see.
yeah,
Okay.
prison definitely made him look a lot better.
Yeah, I guess he was working out. He had a lot of time to lift weights and, not as much food to eat. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how many years he served, but yeah, I would say, I mean, I wouldn't trust him with my Bitcoin, but yeah, I mean, he probably should be given a chance to do something with his life, I would imagine. So,
And I was always rooting for this guy, the guy who stood out front of Mt. Gox and demanded his money, only to have Karpelès walk by him with his cafe frappallacho or whatever it was as he busily went to work in his doomed startup. But now I do agree with the panel. I am starting to have some kind of, misgivings. Maybe he wasn't such a bad villain. As Jimmy said, he was over his head. He bought an exchange that, as far as we know, was already hacked, already had negative deficits. He probably needed that Frappalato. Vlad Costa, what do you think about Mark Karpeles? Is he such a bad guy?
I think this whole conversation on the second day of Christmas is very Dickensian. We're being visited by the ghost of Christmas past, and we have to reflect upon all of these people like the SBF guy from FTX and Mark Karpeles. I think in hindsight, Mark Karpeles was more honorable than the modern day scammers. He still lost a lot of people, a lot of Bitcoin. To his credit, I think a lot of the Mt. Gox people got some money back. I think it was last year or something, that they were able to redeem some of the Bitcoin that they had, but I think it was denominated in US dollars. So they did not get the amount of Bitcoin that they had, but they got the amount in Bitcoin denominated in the US dollar holdings that they had at the time. So it's still something, but it's not what everyone wanted. I think also that this guy is responsible for possibly the biggest and most famous bear markets in the history of Bitcoin. So I don't know. What's interesting for me is that in this article that you linked, it says that today Karpeles says he owns no Bitcoin personally, though his business accepts it as a form of payment. Discussing the current state of Bitcoin, he critiqued centralization risks in ETFs and figures like Michael Saylor, saying this is a recipe for catastrophe. I like to believe in crypto and mathematics and different things, but I don't believe in people. It's interesting that this guy who potentially owned hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin at some point, personally, I don't mean his customers' coins, he sort of lost faith in the system today.
Well, he did get sent to jail and such for running an exchange. Probably soured it for him. Also, he probably lost his Bitcoin in a boating accident. There was probably a Trezors don't float kind of situation that something went wrong. But as you mentioned, Vlad, MicroStrategy, our next bonus issue, MicroStrategy, now called Strategy B, increases their USD reserve to $2.9 billion. As we've been saying, many people on Twitter seem to think if the price goes to a certain point, suddenly MicroStrategy will just flip over and start selling their Bitcoin. That doesn't seem to be true, as they're providing $2.19 billion in reserve. Jimmy Song, what do you think about MicroStrategy, aka Strategy, and their new reserve offering?
Yeah, this is sort of like the opposite of the inverse Kramer prediction. This tells me that Saylor thinks that we're going to have a bear market, because usually when he gets a loan, he insta buys Bitcoin with it. But instead, he is stocking up on cash, largely because he has all these instruments where he has to pay out a large amount of dividends. So 10% in Stretch, some others that have dividends that, I think Stretch is what, 10% dividend yield per year. So he wants to make sure that he can pay those out without having to sell his Bitcoin or have to get emergency loans at very bad terms later on. So this tells me he's prepping right now for the bear market. I don't know if this is necessarily what he believes will happen, but there's at least enough of a possibility that he feels the need to have this reserve to pay out those dividends and yield from this cash hoard that he has. And also, like what we've seen with a lot of treasury companies is that the minute that they sell Bitcoin is a giant downgrade on price, because people start realizing, okay, if they're going to sell their Bitcoin, then this goes to zero. Like they're even more sensitive to any price drops, and they don't have the upside that Bitcoin allows you to have if you're selling your Bitcoin. So this is, it's an interesting signal, and we'll see what he does in the coming weeks if we get like a bull run, and especially if we get a bull run in 2026, how he manages that, and whether he sells more preferreds or sells more stretch, like how does he manage to acquire more Bitcoin, and what mechanism he's going to use? Because what we found out with convertible debt is that you get shorted to death, right? The trade that everyone takes is they long the convertible and then they short the main underlying, and then they make the difference, and that made a lot, that made his stock go down significantly, and that's something that I think he's vowed not to do again, and he's instead doing these preferreds with, predictable returns. That's essentially using the market as some kind of bank to go and raise a lot of money. And we'll see. But it's definitely an interesting signal on where he thinks the market is going.
Robert Allen, it's an impressive signal at $2.19 billion. What do you think about MicroStrategy? Are they bearish on Bitcoin? And what about this new reserve?
Well, I think he has to be a little more conservative with his cash position, given that he has these interest-bearing instruments. So I guess I would say, I don't know if it's so much that he's necessarily bearish as he's just having to position himself more conservatively. Because yeah, I mean, of course, it would be very bad PR if he had to sell Bitcoin. And so I think, he's wanting to have a cushion to make sure that he is not in that position. But yeah, I mean, perhaps also, he's wondering, hey, maybe we have a little bit more headwind in front of us here before the next run up. That could be his thinking as well.
Vlad Costa, what do you think? Saylor increases his reserve to 2 billion with a B.
It does sound like he's loading up on dry powder to buy the dip at some point. Like maybe we are close to the ending of the bull market and he's waiting to buy at the bottom, which is not a bad strategy, to be honest. Like a lot of people in Bitcoin, I remember Trace Mayer was doing this with his Mayer multiple back in the day. And he was always talking about selling the top and buying the bottom. Maybe that Saylor is finally realizing that his signals are not pumping the market anymore. So why would he buy at a high price when he can just wait? Usually, yeah, he was always buying Bitcoin directly at any price, but it seems like he's being more conservative and cautious this time, which is not necessarily bad. It's what a lot of us do, except that he does it on a much larger scale.
As Vlad mentioned, this next company said that they were going to be a Bitcoin reserve company, but they were going to sell the top and buy the bottom. They were going to use an algorithm. It was all going to work out great. And now it doesn't seem like it's going well. Kindly MD faces NASDAQ delisting risk after failing to meet minimum share price levels. The quote, healthcare and Bitcoin treasury firm has 6 months to lift its share price above $1 for 10 consecutive days. It sounds like bad news for the David Bailey-backed Nakamoto's, which took over Kindly MD's stock symbol and company to become a Bitcoin reserve company. The company launched here in Las Vegas at the Bitcoin convention, launched by David Bailey, who I believe owns Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Media, Let's Talk Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin conventions. However, it doesn't look like it's going well for his Bitcoin treasury vehicle. Jimmy Song, what do you think of Kindly MD, aka Nakamoto, Naka, getting potentially delisted from the stock market?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable. They're trading at like 30 something cents, and the peak, I think in July was like 20 something dollars. It's a brutal crash, right? It's bordering on like something absolutely nuts, because they're going down faster than Bitcoin because they leveraged and they took out debt to buy Bitcoin, and they mostly bought at levels that are higher than the current situation. They have something like 5,700 Bitcoin, but unless they get a new cash infusion, it's going to be very rough. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think they filed the paperwork that they needed to the SEC last month, and they're probably in danger of not doing it this month either. As a public company, you have to have regulatory filings and so on. I mean, if they get delisted off the Nasdaq, then what the heck was all that for? Because that was, as far as I could see, the big bet that David Bailey put in. He hired some very high-powered people to his board. He put a lot of money into it. He was going to have Kindly MD or Nakamoto buy the Bitcoin conference and everything else associated with it. He bought the domain nakamoto.com from Balaji. I think he actually traded it for some shares or something. So like it's not cheap like what he did. And it's looking worse and worse every day. And like my thesis has been with a lot of these treasury companies, there's just way too many of them. And a lot of them are essentially banking on the on something like what the GBTC trade was. It had a premium for a while, but once it crashed, it had a huge deficit that essentially wiped out the entire arbitrage market. And we found out later that all these other companies, including Luna and FTX, and they all trace back to the GBTC premium, and the assumption was that the premium would stay, and when it stopped, then they all started losing money, and they couldn't return to the investors what they promised, and that's kind of what seems to be happening with a lot of these treasury companies, where for a while there you could essentially buy $2 worth of, you can get like $2 worth of equity for $1 that you put in and so on. So it made sense because your MNAV was high. Now that it's below 1, it's looking pretty terrible, and they're going to be. And I talked about like sailors sort of like being against convertible debt and so on. That's definitely happened to Nakamoto as well. They took out a lot of convertible debt. From what I hear, the terms of a lot of the debt that they had were terrible, which is why they refinanced like 3 or 4 times. And I mean, if we get any sort of prolonged bear market, I think companies like this, maybe Sequence, even ASST, that's the one by Vivek Ramaswamy. So a lot of these treasury companies, I think, go bankrupt or close to bankrupt. And I don't know, maybe that's a bear market sacrifice we need to kick off the bull market, because they're playing all these leverage games that the market has a way to clear out, so that there's maximum payment involved.
Well, when the fire sale comes, let me know, because I'll buy Let's Talk Bitcoin for $1. But it is too bad, Jimmy. They had such a clever plan to get listed under this Kindly MD, buying a company similar to the clever plan launched by FTX when they purchased the Blockfolio app, buying all of their customers and client lists, transforming that by update into the FTX app. In the same way here, they hope to transform Bitcoin Magazine and the media and the conference into Nakamoto's. It's also an interesting idea, as you said, Jimmy, that they plan to sell the conference to the company. I'll bet that would have been a great asset, a good thing for them to hold. We all saw when the Money 2020 client list essentially sold for millions and millions of dollars. I bet they have the same thing there with the Bitcoin conference. I don't know if they're going to be able to sell it anymore, but what a trap. Nothing could go wrong unless you make your first buy when the price is too high. And it seems like they've put themselves in that position where their first buy was too high. Now they can't defend their position. Now they're in real trouble.
Yeah, the parallels here are striking, because Consensus was the big conference beforehand, and of course Barry Silbert was the GBTC guy. It seems like David Bailey is making the same mistake that Barry Silbert made, and Barry Silbert, of course, like did horribly, and ended up having to sell Consensus and the conference and so on. But yeah, I mean, this what happens when you play with leverage and so on, is you get that. I don't wish anything bad on David. I think he's done a great job with the Trump administration, and at least getting some of the de minimis, legislation into the halls of Congress and, legitimatizing it, at least in the eyes of the public more because of that and so on. But honestly, like, it's crazy that the same mistake that Barry made is the same one that David's going to make.
It's not always the first Greek out of the horse that takes over Troy. And it's also interesting how it's the opposite of Tether, where Tether allegedly takes all of their reserves, makes this big bet on Bitcoin at the bottom, now is completely untouchable financially. Nakamoto seemed to have taken a big bet on Bitcoin at the top, or what seems like a local top, and now is in serious financial trouble, being traded by similar instruments that have crushed others before. Maybe even what was that guy that was against the short selling? He went for the fight, McAfee or Elon or somebody. Somebody was a big the Overstock.com guy, Michael. He was a big anti-short seller guy. Robert
Preston
Allen.
Byrne or something? Yeah.
Preston Byrne, that sounds right. Somebody like that. Well, they'll tell me in the comments, I'm sure. Robert Allen, what do you think of Kindly MD, aka Nakamoto's, the Bitcoin treasury company launched by David Bailey of Bitcoin Media, potentially being delisted?
Well, hindsight is 2020. So I guess being gracious, extending some grace to these guys. I could see how the hype, the excitement, politicians are on board, government's on board, feeling like they had all this momentum. And then seeing the success of strategy and then thinking, hey, I'm gonna take this playbook and run with it. Um, I could see how people could fall into that trap. I do think what kept me from falling into that trap was, having principles, and not to say that they don't have principles. A lot of people don't. Um, yeah, I mean, when people are talking about paper Bitcoin, and anytime someone's putting an adjective in front of Bitcoin or, something on Bitcoin or, you know, trying to add some additional spice to the recipe, we should all be a little cautious, I think. And so I had a bad feeling about paper Bitcoin summer. And for the reasons that Jimmy said, you start playing with leverage, and sure, if the market goes the way you're hoping it does, you could look like a genius. But if it goes the other way, which it very well might, you can get wiped out. I used to play around, sadly, with leverage at one point until I got burned enough times to finally realize it's not a game worth playing. So, we all learn hard lessons in life. It sucks to learn a hard lesson on the national stage with a stock. So I hope it doesn't go that way for them. But in the end, Bitcoin is about being able to be your own bank, hold your own wealth, and transact with that. And so when people are, creating these elaborate stocks to accumulate it and so on and so forth, it's really antithetical in a lot of ways to what Bitcoin is about. And so I understand why they're doing it, but on the other side, it's, I'm not that sad that this is happening, because I'd much rather individuals understand Bitcoin and use it. And that's how we have the freedom that we're looking for, is if enough of us are actually using Bitcoin as money. If it's, held in 20 different stocks and traded as a financial asset, we've really missed the boat. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe it's good that some of these companies get liquidated and we get back to what Bitcoin is really about.
It was interesting, Robert. This paper Bitcoin company wasn't like Michael Saylor's paper Bitcoin company, which is all raw, raw, raw Bitcoin. This one actually said that they were going to, quote, use an algorithm or what have you to sell the tops and buy the bottoms, and that they were going to be more immune from these shifts in the market. What we've seen is the exact opposite. They seem to have bought the absolute top, now in huge financial trouble. And it seemed questionable from the beginning. We talked about it on this show. Many other people on Twitter were upset about it, and it seemed bad from the start. Also, I looked it up. It was Elon Musk who was famously against shorts and short sellers. It seems like a lifetime ago, but I completely agree I'm against short selling. I don't think it's good. And also, Vlad, I wanted to mention, according to the internet, many insiders such as Adam Back, Jameson Lopp, and other friends of the show, and Bitcoiners who all say, all my money's in Bitcoin, I have no more money, were secretly investing in this Nakamoto's. There was some kind of idea they might have even gotten early, cool stock prices, which don't matter at all now. But Vlad, what do you think about Kindly MD and Nakamoto's? It's not looking good.
I've actually had David Bailey on my podcast like 3 weeks ago, and he was very much humbled by the market. And he's not a bad guy, but at the same time, I'm happy that I did not buy into this paper Bitcoin summer. And a bunch of fellow podcasters were shilling it very heavily and saying, well, you should buy into these what they're called, treasury companies, and they're really great and they're going to be the next 10x, and maybe that Bitcoin will not 10x from here very soon, but these companies are solid and you should invest in them and buy stocks and whatever. I'm very happy that I stayed away because, first of all, that's not why I got into Bitcoin. If I want a shitcoin, I'll just shitcoin, okay? If I want to buy into something that maybe sounds interesting and one day will come to Bitcoin, I'm just gonna buy that as opposed to just company stocks, and at least I can buy it with more privacy and with a degree of censorship resistance. For a lot of these guys, it seemed like a free pass to shitcoin after a long time of being held back by the culture. Finally, they had this safe investment, which they could use to signal, first of all, that Bitcoin is a financial asset, which is acknowledged by the big players on Wall Street. And secondly, that they could actually get rich off of it, make more Bitcoin. It did not turn out to be. As far as I know, none of these companies are actually doing pretty good. I know that David Bailey also tried to copy the MicroStrategy playbook with, what was it called? Like a Japanese company that was doing exactly the same, a hotel company.
Metaplanet.
Metaplanet, I think. Yeah.
Metaplanet. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's the one. None of this succeeded. I think we should go back to the drawing board, read the message in the Genesis block, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. Like, what are we even doing anymore? We're in bed with bankers and we're supposed to think that they're our friends and they're gonna make us rich with the technology that was invented to replace them. I don't know. Sort of defeats the purpose.
And I heard the same thing about MicroStrategy stock, Vlad. They said all these people who are into Bitcoin and they always tell you all their money's in Bitcoin, they have nothing left. Somehow they were all buying MicroStrategy stock and made tons and tons of money. But I don't know how it turned out, if they went down with the ship, if they went all the way up and all the way down. But we're running out of time, so we're going to move on to prediction or story of the week. Jimmy Song, a prediction or story of the week. Go ahead.
The prediction or story of the week for me is the article that's been making the rounds, The Lost Generation by Jacob Savage. And if you haven't read it, it is quite the read, and it's sort of blown the roof off of a lot of millennial white men. So as the only non-white male on this panel, I will highlight this particular article because it goes into how basically young white men have been shut out of a lot of fields, and this includes academia, Hollywood, media, and he has the receipts to prove it. And you can see it in the tenure track based hiring in academia, the writers' rooms in Hollywood, media, and so on. And honestly, I think it's been happening in corporate America as well. And one of the throwaway lines in there was, "This is why so many young millennial white men have gotten into quote unquote crypto," which is kind of a really sad thing to kind of hear, because in a sense, a lot of people, a lot of young white men have ended up in crypto because there weren't opportunities elsewhere, and this was the one place where they can sort of go into a meritocracy. Unfortunately, they went into a lot of scams and rent seeking and stupidity that is in a lot of those other industries, and didn't get into something that was productive and entrepreneurial. So I thought it was a really good distillation of what's been happening. There's been a lot of other articles talking about that article and how, white men basically have been suffering from that for the lower and middle classes for 50 years and not just like the last 10, like Jacob Savage is talking about with his quote unquote lost generation. And I think there's a strong point to be made there that it's not the West isn't a meritocracy anymore. You have too much fiat money, too many people that are intent on addressing sort of weird grievances that I don't think are legitimate and so on. So that was for me something that I thought was a good thing to be in the conversation, right? I think Vice President J.D. Vance actually retweeted that particular article among other things, and it's been an interesting thing to be observing how people have been reacting.
Well, it sounds interesting, Jimmy. It's in Compact Magazine at compactmag.com. Robert Allen, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
I guess maybe just piggybacking off of what Jimmy shared there. I think, that story resonates with my life. Definitely was a high achiever in high school, but didn't have the opportunities that probably would have been there if it weren't for just, the things that they talk about in that article. Um, that ultimately led me to look for, career opportunities that were meritocratic. So I got into finance, which at that time was at least, this would have been like, 2010-ish. Um, at least on the level of, hey, you're dialing for dollars, you're just putting in the hours, and if you are good at communicating with people and remembering, the laws and so on and so forth, and understanding how to operate in that world, you can do pretty well for yourself. I got pretty disillusioned by figuring out that the whole thing was a big scam perpetrated on, central banking. And then thankfully I found Bitcoin. It is sad that a lot of, I think, smart people, in many respects, have been sort of, sidelined by broader crypto, because there have been a lot of scams and a lot of time has been wasted. But I don't know if there's really any way around that. When you have, I don't know, I guess just a society that is so built on people scamming. Like it's become so ingrained in how so many people operate. They don't understand the idea of like providing real value. It's just about, hey, how do I quickly make a buck? Whether or not I hurt someone in the process doesn't really matter. I just want to get ahead, right? And so it's basically this sort of amoral attitude um, that I think drives a lot of people, and so they are happy to go into something that is not going to end well as long as they think it'll end well for them. Bitcoin is different, but on the surface, it can look similar enough that they can just look at it and say, oh, well, I missed that boat, so I'm going to jump on this other one. But, it's interesting because my time in Africa has also made me realize, though, that there are opportunities for, I guess you could say highly educated um, white men. It just might mean that they need to go to other countries where they're actually valued. It's interesting, but in Nigeria, I am very well treated. I'm very well respected. And I can hire people for not a lot of money relative to the value that I can get for the work that they can provide for my company. Um, so I think in some ways we just have to, I guess I'm talking to the Americans in particular, perhaps, because that's where I'm from, but we just need to start thinking more creatively about where are the opportunities, and it may not be in the United States for some of us, especially if you're younger and you can travel and you can get out, um, go make a life for yourself. And look, there are opportunities, and there are people who need what's in your head. If you can bring the ideas and the leadership, you can find people that will rally behind you. So, yeah, I think there's opportunity, but it's a shame because there's a lot of waste in the United States now in terms of potential that's just been wasted.
Well, it sounds interesting. Again, it's at a Compact magazine. I'll have to check it out. Vlad Costa, prediction or story of the week?
I think this week I broke the record for the longest podcast interview with a single guest in Bitcoin. We went on for 10 hours, and it's this guy. His name is Moonsettler, and he has been working on something that's called L-Enhance. It's a covenant proposal. And we went over all of these moments in the recent history of Bitcoin when it seemed like we're gonna have some upgrade and we all reach consensus on something. And then suddenly we run into another issue that distracts us. And I don't know. It's really crazy. I'm not sure if we're captured or we're gonna ossify from this point on, but there was so much hope at various points that we're gonna have a lot of use cases and new users using Bitcoin without custodians and in the way that it was meant to be used. I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but it's definitely interesting to reflect upon the moments when we almost had these CTV, L-Enhance, Upcat, or whatever to allow more builders to come to Bitcoin, but we did not. And the question is why and where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? A good question to almost end the year on. I want to thank everybody for being here. Be sure to give us a thumbs up down below. Thanks to Jimmy, Robert, and Vlad for joining us on this, the day after Christmas. We're going to try to do a show again next week. We'll try to do our year-end show next week, or maybe the week after if we can't get people together. It is like the day after New Year's next week. But thanks to everybody for joining us all year here at the Bitcoin Group. So Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Crazy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays. I hope everyone has a nice winter break, however you celebrate it, and enjoy it with family and friends and food and whatever you like. So thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, bye-bye.